Understanding staff children. Let's pray and see what the Lord has for us. Father, I thank you for this opportunity to spend this day with brothers and sisters in Christ and fellow Christian educators. And Lord, I pray as we begin this session, you bless this session and the others going on at this time. And Lord, I pray that we would be practical, useful in the information we present, that these folks would be able to even serve you better by, in this case, understanding staff children and the blessing that they are. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Lo, staff children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. Psalm 127, verse 3.
Obviously, we inserted the word staff in that verse from Psalm 127. But staff children are an heritage. The staff children are an inheritance in the Lord just as much as any other children. This workshop discusses a challenge faced by most Christian schools. And I don't have any statistics to verify it, but I would not be surprised that if the incidence of staff children is even greater in schools using the A.C.E. curriculum program than they are in some other kinds of Christian schools. Then I'm going to ask a question, but it's almost a rhetorical question because based on your answer, if it wasn't what I think it's going to be, you wouldn't be here. How many of you have your children in your learning center or your school? Okay. How about grandchildren? How about a younger sibling, younger brother or sister? Yeah.
Over the
there we got one. We got one. That's what we thought, which is why we suggested this as a topic for a workshop. We have gathered information from a large number of Christian schools using the A.C.E. curriculum and program, and Mrs. Dawson and I threw in a few things ourselves that we picked up along the way.
When we repeat something, and we will several times in this workshop, it's because we think it's so important. And sometimes we're going to come at something from different angles, so don't be surprised when we do that. We hope that you're going to be able to glean at least one or two ideas that you can take home with you that will help you to make the most of the blessing that staff children really are in your school. And as we begin this session, let's remember who staff children are
and who they are not. They are not staff. And that makes a difference in what you allow them to hear. And you need to remember that when they want to, they have very good hearing. And if you whisper so they don't hear you, they pay that much more close attention.
That's right. They are staff children, and that means you have to train them a little bit differently, don't you? They're going to be around a lot. And they're going to hear a lot of things. So you need to train them when they're very young that they are not to repeat things they hear spoken about at school with the adults, because they really need not to do that or they'll get themselves in trouble, or should.
They should. They are not adults.
They are children.
They are not perfect.
They are imperfect.
They are not finished.
No, they are a work in process.
And most assuredly, they are not liabilities.
No, they are opportunities and privileges.
If we're going to understand staff children, we first need to recognize the pressures, and I might even say unique pressures that staff children face.
Staff children do face peer pressure. Now, all children face peer pressure, but staff children face a certain kind of peer pressure, and that is that other students who have been corrected by you probably won't come back and say anything to you, but they will to your children. It's not fair, but life isn't fair, and it's going to happen. And so you have to prepare your children for that if somebody comes back and says something like that, it's not about you, honey. Don't get upset. They really were just upset with mommy or daddy. Other students may sometimes view your children as snitches or informers, and hopefully there's no validity to that.
Something Mrs. Dawson and I did when we were in the Learning Center to discourage tattling. When a child came to us and said, Billy's doing thus and so, we would ask the question, is whatever Billy's doing, is it dangerous? Is someone going to get hurt? Or are you just trying to get Billy in trouble? You might consider doing the same thing if your children come to you and say that Susie's doing something to find out whether being a snitch or not. Is what Susie's doing dangerous, or are you just trying to get Susie in trouble? Staff children face staff pressure as well. Other staff members, and I might even say perhaps staff members who do not have children in the school, expect staff children to be perfect. And they're not. And in addition to that pressure from other staff members, sometimes your children are, especially when they get a little bit older, are aware of how their actions, attitudes, and words can reflect negatively on you. And they are afraid sometimes to do things because they don't want to make you look bad. So that's an additional pressure that staff children face.
And then they face the pressure of circumstances. Staff children are often told, and we've heard it, they're told things like this: you can't do this or you can't do that because we're in the ministry. What would people think of our family if you did something like that? That is wrong. Don't tell your children that. That's not why they should behave, is it? You train your children by saying, do right because it's right. Do right because that's what Jesus would want you to do. The truth is, if you tell them to just do right because you're in the ministry, what happens when they leave your school? They may or may not choose to do right. But if you train them to do right because it's biblical and because God wants them to do it, hopefully when they leave your school, they'll continue to do it.
Character is what we do when no one else is looking. We need to sometimes perhaps to refine our attitudes regarding staff children. We refine our own attitudes.
Be thankful for staff children. In many schools over the years that we've talked to, the reason you have a school is because of the staff children. Maybe there's a terrible school, public school in your area.
Riverview Middle School in Denton, Maryland.
And that is why we started our school in Maryland. The parents came to the pastor and said, there is no way we can let our children go to the school. It was horrible, absolutely horrible. And so that is why we started our Christian school. And almost all of the children in our school when we first started were staff children because the mothers were volunteering to make it possible for us to have that school. So don't be surprised. Count them as blessings and thank God that you can have a Christian school so that your children don't have to be exposed to the things of the world.
And then look for good to compliment. We're going to have more to say here in a few moments about accusations of preferential treatment. But many times when your children are in your school or in the learning center, you will withhold, and other staff members who have children in the school will withhold encouragement, love, and affirmation from their own children to avoid potential accusations of preferential treatment. And you certainly should not do that. Your children have the same need for encouragement, love, and affirmation as any child, and you should extend it to them as you would any other child.
You want to treat all the children equally, and that really is your goal as a Christian educator. We have always believed that a school should be like a family, and that you treat those children like you would treat your own, whether they're yours or not. And once the children know that you love them, they will stop thinking that maybe you're showing that favoritism to your children. But be careful, because favoritism towards your children goes both ways. If a child, any other child, would get one demerit for something that they did, don't you dare say to your child, well, you knew better, I'm giving you 2 demerits for that.
Forget 2 demerits, it's an automatic detention.
Sometimes we overreact with our own children, and we need to be careful that we don't do that. Treat them all like your own and just love them.
I want to underscore something Mrs. Dawson said about loving. Make sure you love children in your learning center, in your school, all of them. You've heard it perhaps a dozen times, but it doesn't make it any less true. Children don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
It's true.
Then we have to guard our spirit towards other staff members, kind of the flip side of a point we made earlier. When we are disciplining a staff child, not our own, but another staff child, we don't want to fall into the trap of thinking, well, they should have trained their child better than this. Why do I have to deal with this kind of thing? Because the point we want to make in this workshop over and over and over again, staff children, A child is a child is a child is a child. It doesn't make any difference what their mom and dad do.
That's right. And as a parent, be positive and supportive of the school staff. Don't let your children gripe about the staff. And don't you gripe about the staff at home either.
Especially in front of your children.
Especially. You want to make sure that you're supporting that staff member. Suppose your child is in a learning center with Mrs. James. And she comes home.
She's
Is
right
she
there.
here? Oh, she's here. Okay, good. Okay, Mrs. James. Sarah comes home from school today, and she's all upset, and she's just going on and on and on about what happened. How am I going to respond as a mother? Because remember, I'm responding as a mother at home. I need to say, Sarah, we know that Mrs. James loves you. I'm sure that she didn't mean to hurt your feelings. You try to soften it over. You support the staff member. But remember, you are a parent, so you have the same rights as any other parent in that school. If you feel the need, you make an appointment with Mrs. James and you say, may I come in and talk to you after school today? But when you go in, do it the right way. Go in as a parent. You leave your title outside of the room when you come in for that parent conference. And you sit down and say, Miss James, Sarah came home yesterday and she was really upset. And she told me that this happened. Now I know that went through her emotions. And I know that she was upset. So I'm sure there's more to the story than what she was able to tell me. In her immaturity, she probably didn't realize everything that happened. Could you explain to me what really happened so that I can go home and explain it to her and we get this right? That's how you would want anybody to come to you. So as a parent, that's what you want to do. Make sure that you do that for your child. Remember, even if you are the pastor or even if you are the principal, don't bully that supervisor. You leave that title outside the room and you come in and just talk to them as a parent.
If Mrs. Dawson said support your staff, it's the staff member. It's very important that a staff child not be treated any differently, either way, positively or negatively, because of whose they are. When you are a parent of a student, you have the same rights as Mrs. Dawson said to talk to your child's supervisor, but you make sure you leave your job title, your position outside the door. Okay. We want to develop a relaxed relationship with our own children when we are on staff. We don't need to make everything a big deal with our own children. Let them be children. Many children will want to tell you as mom or dad about their school day at the end of the day. And you're thinking, I know 99.9% of what happened because I was there too. But that they still want to tell you. And maybe the younger ones want to tell you more. You have some children who they like to talk. They want to tell you about everything that happened. Our son, when he was little, we said if Aaron fell asleep in mid-sentence, when he woke up the next morning, he'd just pick up where he left off.
Pick up where he left off. He's our talker.
It's from that gene pool.
Yes, it is. But it's okay. He's a preacher now.
But you may not be able to listen right now, so you could say, well, you can tell me about it in the car on the way home or after we get home. But if you say that, then make sure you put aside time for you to listen to everything they want to say, and then make sure you listen without comment, reply, or rebuttal. You just listen.
Here's a tough one. Allow staff children to fail. Allow them to make mistakes because they'll grow from them. They will. Sometimes we're just so eager for our children to be perfect. We just want them to be right all the time and do everything right. They're human. They're not going to do everything right. But sometimes we block the lessons that they could learn by their mistakes. They are going to make mistakes. And we need to remember there are no perfect children. And your children are no more perfect than anybody else's children. And we don't want to rob them of those life lessons.
I would imagine probably virtually everyone in this room could give testimony of how the Holy Spirit used a failure in your life to teach you, maybe several, to teach you some very important life lessons that you may not have been able to learn any other way. We acknowledge that as adults, but then as parents, we try to get in between and prevent our children from learning those life lessons by failing. And many times, it'd be much better for your child if they could learn that life lesson when they're 7 instead of having to wait and we get in the middle and postpone it and they're 17 or 27 before that they learn that life lesson. So allow them to fail and realize that being defensive about your child's behavior or accomplishments or treatment may be more a reflection of your pride and ego than it is anything else, because you want them to be perfect, or you want to have a good testimony among the staff.
We need to remember that Satan will do anything to get you out of the ministry. That's his goal. And how better to get at you than through your children. So be aware of that.
All right, I mentioned a few moments ago about accusations of preferential treatment. Accusations of preferential treatment will come. They are going to happen. Is it working?
It is. I need to leave it alone.
They're going to happen. Now, you want to make sure that when those accusations of preferential treatment come, that they are totally groundless.
Yes.
That you've done everything in your power to ensure that you've not treated your own children preferentially. But when they do come, let your upline deal with the accusation of preferential treatment. If you're the monitor, let the supervisor deal with it. If you're the supervisor, let the principal or administrator deal with it. If you're the principal or administrator, let the pastor deal with it. If you're the pastor, I guess you're on your own. But then if you're the upline, support your staff member.
Yes.
Don't assume just because somebody came and told you that a staff member treated their children differently that there's any validity or truth to the accusation. Right. At best, you might say, well, I'll look into that and get back with you. Don't, especially in front of that other adult, say that you assume what they said is true, because you need to support your staff member. And then if you feel like it needs to be investigated, go ahead and do it. Before I went in the ministry, I managed restaurants. And something that always burned my toast when I was the general manager of a restaurant where I had other managers reporting to me is one of the other managers would instruct an employee to how to handle specific situation. This is our policy, especially when it dealt with dealing with a customer. So when the employee did exactly what they were instructed to do, and the customer complained and asked to see a manager, the manager would go out there and they would knuckle under and let the customer have or do whatever it was that they were told they can't do. How do you think that staff member felt? I did exactly what you told me to do and you didn't support me. Don't do that to your staff.
And then realize that when you're dealing with parents, whether they're staff parents or just other parents as well, you can expect different responses from men than you're going to get from women.
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
That is the truth. Now, mom might say something like, my daughter would never do something like that. Or this is my favorite that I actually have heard. If I were a better mother, she never would have thought of doing that. It's all my fault, not hers. Please.
But if you're talking to dad, he may say, is that all he did? He didn't burn the building down. What's the big deal?
And be careful about internalizing things. Sometimes we internalize things that happen to our children. We get upset. We don't like the way it was handled. Or sometimes we get upset over things that didn't happen for our children. We thought they should get something and they didn't get it. You need to back off and let God use those instances in your child's life to build character. Just step back and let him have his way.
If we could summarize this entire workshop, I think we could do it in this next statement. That you need to, as a parent, you need to think about how you would like another parent to receive you're communicating with them about something their child did. What the perfect response would be in your estimation. And then you do the same thing. You respond. Notice it said respond, not react. Respond in the same way. It's about your child. It's not about you. We're talking about your child, not your parenting skills. We're talking about something your child did. So you receive it the same way you would expect other parents to receive it.
And then be aware that staff children really can have a bossy or haughty attitude. They can be bossy or haughty. And when they are, they deserve whatever they get. Don't you step in. If they're being bossy and somebody comes back at them, you just step back. You just step back because they really shouldn't be doing that. Remember, they're not staff. Of course, your staff better not be bossy or hot either. But they need to learn that they have to behave themselves. We have worked in a few ministries, one that I can think of in particular, where the pastor's children were untouchable. They were treated like royalty. Nobody was allowed to say anything to them, much to the detriment of those children. It was very, very sad for them because they never got corrected. We had a friend who shared a story with us that he was visiting a school one time, and just as he walked into the lobby of the school, a little guy came sliding down the banister, knocked him over, knocked him on the floor. The boy fell on the floor, jumped up and said, "I'm the pastor's son. What are you going to do about it?" I told him I know what I would have done about it, but think about it. That child didn't come up with that on his own. Something had happened, something had been said, where he got in his little mind that that was the truth, that he could do whatever he wanted to do. What a shame for that child. It scares me to think about where that child might be today if he kept that attitude as he was growing up. And what about the pastor's ministry? That doesn't speak very well of his father's ministry, does it? So be careful that we don't do that with our children.
Many of you know that I love English history. A story I want to tell you that illustrates this point very easily. Prince Andrew is Queen Elizabeth's second son. When Prince Andrew was little, he discovered that the sentries at the door of Buckingham Palace, when he went out the door, the sentry had to snap to attention and salute. And when he came back in the door, the sentry had to snap to attention and salute. So as a little boy, he thought that was fun. So he would go out the door and go back in the door, and go out the door and go back in the door, and even doing the raspberries as he was going by. So finally the soldier, even though he knew who Prince Andrew was, finally said, "Listen, kid, get lost." So Prince Andrew went and got his father, Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth's husband. Prince Philip is a military man known for his temper and his firmness. Here comes Prince Philip with Prince Andrew, and Prince Philip says to the sentry, "Did you tell my son to get lost?" And the soldier figured, well, my duty at the palace is over. I'm just going to tell him exactly what happened. So he told Prince Philip exactly what happened. Prince Philip listened. Then he turned to Prince Andrew and said, "You heard the man, get lost."
I love it. Dad points.
We want to have a clear understanding with our children when they are staff children. Explain that you, especially for the younger ones, explain that you cannot act as their parent at school. Now, don't say something totally ridiculous like, "At school, you don't have a father." That's ridiculous. You just say, "At school, it's different. I don't stop being your parent. It's just different." And now this next point applies to the ladies, I think, more than to the men. If you hear your child crying, and mothers, there could be 1,000 children, and if yours is the one crying, you know that's mine. If you hear your child cry, don't you go running over to find out what's going on. Let the staff member to whom your child is responsible deal with the situation. If it is serious enough, that staff member will come and get you. Otherwise, stay out.
That's right. And then, in all of these types of situations that we're talking about, there is the potential for you to do something wrong or say something wrong. And when you do, you have a golden teaching opportunity, and you need to become the peacemaker. You have to choose to be the peacemaker, ready to apologize, ready to forgive. And if you did something wrong, especially if you did it in front of all the children, then you need to apologize in front of all the children. And you can train them how to apologize properly by doing this in front of them. Most of the time, if you ask a child to apologize, what do they say? "Sorry." No, they're not.
They're sorry they got caught.
They're not. And they're sorry that you're making them do that. So you have to train them how to apologize properly. So you would say to the children, "Children, I want you to sit down. I want to talk to all of you. When I did this," and tell them what it was that you did, "I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. will you please forgive me? Now, lots of times when you do that with a child, the first thing they'll say is, it's okay. No, what I did was wrong, and I need to ask you to forgive me. Will you please forgive me? Now, many people will think, as an adult, if you do that, you will lose the respect of the children, and nothing is further from the truth. They will love you for it. They will love you for it.
I've got bad news for you. All the children in the Learning Center already know you're not perfect.
That's true.
If anybody knows you're not perfect, it's the children in your Learning Center. You want to allow the Lord to draw you closer to your children because they are staff children. There are many parents who would give their right arm to be able to spend as much time with their children as you get to spend with your children.
And then we want to respond with proper actions with staff children.
Proper actions. That means make no, capital N, capital O, bold type, underlined twice, 3 exclamation points. No exceptions with staff children.
No exceptions means don't say, we'll work on that at home tonight. If you are your child's supervisor and they put up their flag and they ask for help, they have just as much right to get help as anybody else in that learning center. And if you tell them to wait till later, you're going to keep them from finishing their goals. You're going to keep them from getting a green dot treat, maybe at the end of the week, and they're going to resent it, because they have as much right to your time as the other children. So make sure that you don't put it off until later. But
the other side of that same coin, no exceptions means there's no extra help at school because they are your child.
That's right.
Your child's flag or any staff member's child's flag should not be answered any faster than anyone else's flag. And if at all possible, if your child is in your learning center, let the other staff member in the learning center with you answer your child's flag.
Yes.
Now, if you're the supervisor, obviously they're going to need you for self-test initials or academic help, but let that monitor deal with the scoring, may use the restroom, may sharpen my pencil, may get a dictionary, all those kinds of things, so that you can keep things in balance.
No exceptions means no parents' signatures given at school. The other children can't get parents' signature at school, so neither can yours. And by the way, if you're on the staff, don't sign other children's homework slips, please. They need to learn the lesson that they're responsible to do that at home. And by the way, they could be using that to shortchange information to their parents. I don't want mom and dad to know I have homework tonight because I want to do something else. So they come in and then they beg you to sign it. And if you do, you're shortchanging that, and their parents don't understand. They need to get that demerit if they didn't get it signed.
Something that Mrs. Dawson and I did when we were in the Learning Center, and Mrs. Dawson kept this right in her gold checkbook. We had from the beginning of the school year what we knew was a bona fide signature from both dad and mom. So if we got any signature on a parent communication envelope, a homework slip or whatever, that looked a little fishy, we would pull out what we knew was mom or dad's signature and compare the two to make sure this was legitimate. We had one, this is several years ago, one little guy forgot to get his homework slip signed.
It's the best one.
And he was going to sign it. He signed it Jimmy's mommy.
It was adorable, but he got the demerit anyway.
No exceptions means no extra money given at school. It's $2 for Pizza Friday. It's $5 for the field trip. If your child forgot to get the money from you before they left from home, guess who's not eating pizza for lunch?
Now that may sound
Or guess
harsh.
who's not going on the field trip?
That's even worse.
Because the other children can't get mom and dad to get the money from them because mom and dad aren't there.
And don't be a marshmallow and pay for everybody who forgot either. But the truth is, that's only going to happen once. It is. Hopefully it won't happen at all. But if you don't cave, they'll remember the next time. No exceptions means no frequent release from the Learning Center. We shouldn't see your child wandering around the school during the day when they're supposed to be in the Learning Center. Now, there will be times when you need to send a child on an errand. That's fine, but don't always send your child. You have children in the Learning Center who have C&E privilege. They've proven that they can be trusted, and so you can alternate who you send on those errands. Of course, then there's always that little guy that needs to get up and move more than everybody
Mr.
else.
ADHD.
And you might want to send him on an errand once in a while. Just make sure he comes back. Keep track of him.
No exceptions means no scoring after school hours. By and large, most of the time, your children are going to have to wait for you after school. Anybody can do homework after school, but other children can't score after school, neither should your children.
And no turning in of paces after school. Again, all of these little things that nobody else can do, don't you let your children do it.
No exceptions means no official staff initials after school hours outside of the Learning Center. A self-test should never be done outside the Learning Center. Other children can't get self-test initials, supervisor score strip initials, and so forth. Neither should your children be able to do it after school.
No exceptions means no ignored discipline. First of all, it's a really bad idea to say, if your child gets in trouble at school, I'll take care of that tonight. That is a really bad idea. First of all, it's going to be hanging over your child for the rest of the day. You might forget, which would really be bad because that gives mixed signals.
Or mom or dad might accidentally on purpose
forget. But the point is, you want to have school and you want to have home. Don't carry all of those things from school back home with you.
No exceptions means no usage of off-limit equipment or access to off-limit areas. Again, they're waiting for you after school. If you have specific games or videos or CDs or whatever that are only for students with C&E privilege, don't let your children have access to those things after school. If there are parts of the building that children are not allowed in without adult supervision, your children shouldn't be wandering around in the building of those parts, especially another learning center, perhaps where there are score keys. So make sure they stay where you tell them to stay.
No exceptions means no special lunch. That means if you have microwave ovens and only the staff can use those, don't you dare bring your child something and slip it into the microwave and then give it to them. None of the other children can have it. So make sure that you are equitable with all of them.
No exceptions means no securing of forgotten items after hours or on the weekends. Dad, I had homework and I left my paces in my office. Oh, well, guess who's going to have a goal violation tomorrow morning? Or it's Saturday afternoon. Mom, I left my PE uniform or my volleyball uniform or my basketball uniform in my locker. Oh, well, guess who's going to have to wear a stinky uniform on Monday? Other children can't go into school and get their forgotten paces or uniforms, neither should yours.
Neither should yours. And then no exceptions means no interrupting, no arguing or sarcasm allowed. Now, I hope you're not allowing that at home. But do not allow your children to do any of these things in school. They need to pay the penalty if they do.
Don't penalize staff children by shielding them from needed love, discipline, and responsibility. Again, love all the children equally. If they need to be disciplined, discipline them appropriate for whatever was the infraction may have been, and require them the same degree of responsibility you require of any other child.
And allow other staff members to discipline, motivate, and help your child. As a matter of fact, encourage it. Let the other staff members minister to your children. They have different giftings than you do. And have you figured out that your children will respond differently to them than they do to you? They do. They're going to be able to teach your children in a way that they're going to receive it sometimes that they might not receive it from you. Now, we believe that the best scenario is that your children not be in the learning center with you, if at all possible. It's not always possible. Many of our schools, you only have one high school learning center, or you have just one learning center altogether. And so your children are there with you. If that is the case, try to let the other staff members answer their flag as much as possible. Now again, if you're the supervisor, you're going to have to give those supervisors initials. You're going to have to score those strips for them. But it's much, much better for your child if they have that other input.
Sarah didn't like it.
Oh, she spent her whole high school career with the two of us. We were the supervisors in her learning center in high school. She couldn't get away from us, could she?
Only option she had.
That's right.
Don't change policies because of or for staff children. If you have a policy or procedure in place in your learning center and you come to the conclusion, this isn't working.
It's not working.
This isn't accomplishing what we want to accomplish. Don't change it when a staff child gets caught in it. Wait until it affects another child and then say, this isn't working, we're going to change it.
And then remind everyone, you, your children, other staff, and other children, of the changed relationship at school. Staff children should call you Mr. and Mrs. or brother or sister. Whatever terminology you use in your school, that's what they should use. We've had people say over the years, well, there's no way the little ones can do that. Oh, please. Please. It's so easy for them. From the time our children were little, we would pull up to the church, we'd check everything in the car, make sure they had everything they were supposed to have, we'd pray, we'd get out, we'd hug, and as soon as we walked in those doors, we were Mr. and Mrs. Dawson. And that's what they called us their entire school career. That showed everybody else that there wasn't that favoritism that you might be accused. That there is a difference when you're at school. And you want them to be able to do that. Our daughter Sarah was really funny. She said that she found an effective way to get my attention, even when we weren't at school. When we were shopping one time, she was down the aisle from me, and she said, I did not hear her say it, she said, Mom, Mrs. Dawson. And I turned right around when she said Mrs. Dawson. So they can pick up on that. They really can.
When we were in Maryland, our first ABC supervisor's name was Mrs. Rafter, R-A-F-T-E-R. Her daughter, Shelley, was in her class. Shelley had a bit of a lisp when she was little, but she very faithfully called her mother for a couple, 3 years, Mrs. Wafter.
Yes, it was wonderful.
It was
so sweet.
But she did what she was supposed to do.
Okay, now that's only half the story.
Yes.
When you're at school, you're Mr. and Mrs. Dawson. But when you go home, will you please go back to being Mom and Dad? They do not need to be in school 24/7. Don't sit at the dinner table and say, what were you doing fooling around at the scoring station today? I saw you. Nobody else gets to see their children fooling around at the scoring station. They don't even know. Why should your kids have to have indigestion every night because you're grilling them about what they did in school that day? So remember, go home and be Mom and Dad.
Would you like to eat dinner with your supervisor? Don't ever use staff children as examples, either positive or negative examples in devotions or a chapel or those kind of things. Your children already feel like they live in a fishbowl.
They do.
So you don't have to accentuate that by using them as examples in chapel and devotions.
And beware of expecting too much or pushing them unreasonably. Okay, we're all educators. We understand we want our children to do their very best, but they're not always going to be number one. Our children are not always going to be on the top of the pile, and we need to let them be who they are. Yes, encourage them to do their very best, but don't push too hard.
You need to maintain a prayerful, loving, balanced, keyword, balanced relationship that is neither too lenient nor too hard. Parents in the Learning Center usually fall into one of two categories. They are either marshmallows and let everybody get away with everything, or they are Attila the Hun, and they cut the children off at the knees because they raised their eyebrow the wrong way. Neither one of those is good. Neither one of those is effective. We had a mom who volunteered as a monitor in our Learning Center in Maryland, and she had 2 daughters in the Learning Center. When she was there, she would walk up behind one of her own daughters with a dictionary or an encyclopedia or something and drop it on the floor right behind her own daughter. And then if she turned around to look, she gave her demerit.
Yeah,
that's Attila the Hun.
We had to talk about that one.
But an additional fact is you need to make sure your relationship with your children when they're in your learning center is balanced, because in my research for a number of topics for CEC, I've discovered that one of the greatest impediments of children, of people who are in the ministry, going into the ministry themselves when they reach adulthood, is their own parents. Because mom and dad, school 24/7, mom and dad griped and complained about the leadership of the school, leadership of the church, the other staff members, complained about what they got paid and what they didn't get paid and so forth in front of their children. And that can ruin many children forever wanting to serve the Lord. They'd rather flip burgers at McDonald's than ever work in a Christian school or a church, because I'm not going to put up with the stuff my parents put up with.
That's really sad, isn't it? And then conduct parent conferences with staff parents after school, just like you do everybody else. Now, I know it's tempting during the day. You have staff mom over here, and you're thinking, if I got her in here at lunchtime, I could check this one off the list. I know that. But you're leaving dad out of the picture, or whoever the non-staff member is. And that's not fair to that other parent, because they have the need and the right to know what's going on with their child. And to be honest with you, we've discovered over the years, sometimes mom would be perfectly happy for dad not to know what's going on with the child, because she's trying to protect them somehow.
At least not all of it.
Not all of it, yes, might tell part of it. And dad needs to know the academics so that he can talk to them and help them with it. He needs to know their behavior so he can train them as well. So make sure that you include both parents in that conference.
Have any adult observing wrong conduct by a staff child to go to the staff member in charge of that activity, not come looking for the parent. The child is responsible to that staff member needs to deal with the situation.
And then reward staff children when they have earned awards and honors, but be aware of the pitfalls. The truth is, the same Holy Spirit that revealed to you that your son should get the highest character award this year, that same Holy Spirit can reveal it to the rest of the staff too. Trust your staff. You need to make sure that you give everybody an opportunity to have their input, and do it anonymously.
Anonymously.
Yeah, don't you sit there at the table and say, who do you think should get it? Who do you think should get it? I mean, how intimidating is that? You want to make sure that they can write it down anonymously, and then you can look at those awards. Now, something that we did with our high school students that you might want to do, because we had separate awards for the high school students, was when it came to those character awards, we had the high school students give us their ideas as well. Now, they didn't decide who got the award, but you would be amazed at their perspective. They know a different side of each other than we might see, and it was always interesting to see what they would say.
If you are going to plan on having the other staff member answer your child's flag, and you're going to answer the other staff member's children's flag, remember to go out of your way to minister well to those other staff children, because they are staff children. They should get every opportunity, privilege, and benefit as any child, but make sure you go out of your way to do it for each other's children. And
then pray even more for the pastors and the principals' children, because they do have influence. They do have influence with the other children. And then there's also that spiritual warfare. Satan would love to get rid of your pastor. He would love to knock your principal out of the game. And so we need to make sure that we're praying earnestly for them.
Make that after-school wait as pleasant, brief, and as profitable as possible. Again, most of the time, maybe you might be able to send them home with another family once in a while, and you pick them up, but usually they're going to wait for you. So plan out at the beginning of the year, this is how we're going to handle your wait after school. Have well thought out guidelines and expectations. They can practice music if they're taking music lessons. Of course, everybody can do homework. If you have little guys, maybe you might bring games or puzzles or books of theirs from home that they can occupy themselves with. However, make sure, this is very important, that your children, especially if you're the supervisor, are not present when you are scoring that day's PACE tests.
Be careful.
And it's very easy to forget they're there. Your child should not know what another child got on their PACE test at all.
Ever.
Much less before the child who took the test knows.
Mm-hmm. And then spend quality time with your own children. We know you're tired when you get home at night. We know that. But you still have to make a little bit of time in that evening for your children. And please, on the weekends, don't cram so much into Saturday and Sunday that you never do anything with your own children. They need your attention. They need to have those fun times with mom and dad, too.
That contributes to the dynamic I mentioned a few moments ago about children of people in the ministry. Mm-hmm. Many times, children whose parents are in the ministry think, you had time for everybody else's children, but you never had time for me. You never came to my ball game. You never came to my piano recital. Mm-hmm. Make sure, again, that staff children do not know any confidential information.
And then allow God to use your pastor and your principal to mold your child's life. You want all the layers of the staff, everybody who's available, to have a part in your child's life. How do you do that? Stop pampering them. Stop trying to overprotect them from anything, and stop defensiveness when people come to you about your children.
Don't compare your children to others. A.C.E. is an individualized, program that includes your children as well.
And let the non-staff parent assist your child with homework. You've been with them all day. You've been in school all day. So if at all possible, we would encourage you to have the non-staff parent sign the homework slips, sign detention slips, and maybe sit
Help
down
with
with them
homework.
with homework a little bit. Yes.
Now, this is a tough one.
Oh, this
if
is
you're
a
the
tough one.
supervisor, it is your right to score your child's test and figure the grade. However, after you've done that, take the test and the test key to another staff member and say, would you check my grading of my child's test? That will eliminate one of those potential accusations of preferential treatment.
That actually protects you. And then don't become a victim of slanted news yourselves. When your children come home and say something, don't assume it's 100% true.
Don't let double punishment become the case. Again, they're not in school 24/7. If you dealt with it at school, it's done.
It's finished. And then train staff children to verbalize their love and support for their parents to their peers in an open, non-defensive way. Especially when they're very small, you need to train them because they don't know how to handle it when someone comes and says something mean about their daddy. They just don't naturally expect it, and they don't know what to do. So you need to say to them, if anybody ever says to you something mean about your daddy, this is what you can say to them. And then you train them. You teach them what to say. Something like this. I love my daddy, and when you say mean things about him, it really hurts my feelings. Could we talk about something else? Non-defensive, non-offensive to the other children, but just a way for them to get out of those conversations.
Rejoice that many of the finest and most charactered students are staff children.
Yes, they are.
Enjoy them. Teaching your own children can be challenging, but God knew that you were going to have children when He called you to the ministry of Christian education. He knew that you were going to be able to handle it.
Staff children, we all have them. Aren't we blessed?